So you are welcome to start anytime you wish. I'm so glad you're here.
Awesome. Excuse me. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jackie Steffen, and I'm a member of Nebraska Extension, and we're here today to talk about a great program that we've put together called Tales and Tales. So it's a 4-H STEM Reading Connections. I know that a few of your faces and names look familiar. So back earlier this winter, we had the opportunity to share our program, which was in the works. Well, now our program is 100% complete. It's up and running. And so we're excited to share some details and some tips and tricks of what we've discovered as we've piloted some of these lessons and after school programs and school settings. And just to answer any questions that you might have in regards to your planning for your summer activities. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and introduce you to our team. You can see that we have a team of 10 dedicated individuals, and we're spread out across the state with different specialty areas. I'm sure as you look at the faces on the screen, some of them may be familiar to you. Feel free to give them a shout out in the chat box or give them a wave if you would like to do that. We all have different specialty interests and areas. We have food and nutrition. We have early childhood featured. We have 4-H youth development featured. We have people who focus in nature or outdoor play. So our team really works collaboratively and well to bring a program together for this summer reading program. So as we kick it off, you just saw all of our team members. And just like people, when animals work together, it benefits the entire community or their group. So there's kind of that motto that together we're better. So that's just like with Nebraska Extension. Together we're better when we partner with other organizations, and we're better when we partner with libraries, especially during the summer and with after school program. So a lot of you may be familiar with the book that's on the screen. So this is PAX, Strength in Numbers, and it's by Hannah Saylor. And what I really like about this book is it is going through a bunch of different animals, and then it lets you know what that grouping of that particular animal is called. So I'm just going to read one page to you so you can get kind of the feel for how this book sounds. We frogs can become one noisy army. When the winter ice melts away, we put on a grand performance to find the perfect partners. You can hear us chirp and bellow our love songs between the tall, swaying grasses of marshes, ponds, and swamps. Together, we sing. So on this particular page, we learn what frogs do best together. We know that they sing, and we know that a grouping of frogs is called an army. So we're going to have a little bit of fun before we get into the nuts and bolts of all the different lessons. And we're going to test your knowledge to find out if you know what different groupings of animals are called. So on the screen, you can see that I have 5 different animal groupings listed, the numbers 1 through 5. If you wouldn't mind opening up your chat box and having that available, what I am going to do is I'm going to give you a group, and you have to predict what you think that grouping of animals is called. So if I said a group of cows, you would say a herd, but since that's not one that's up there, it's not what you would type in. So you'll only need to type in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So let's have some fun. This is my favorite one. What do you predict a group of jellyfish is called? All right, I'm seeing some answers come in. All right, so I see a 1, a 5, and a 3, and if you guessed a 5, you are correct. So a group of jellyfish is called a smack of jellyfish. Let's try another one. How about a grouping of parrots? Go ahead and type your prediction in the chat box. I see them coming in. Excellent. If you typed in a 3, like Michael did, it is a pandemonium, is when we have a group of parrots together. All right, here's another one. A grouping of camels. Oh, I'm seeing fours going down my chat box. You're absolutely right. So it's a caravan of camels. How about a group of goats? Between 1 and 2. And a group of goats is called a tribe. So a tribe of goats. And the final one is a group of spiders. Process of elimination. Excellent. So ones all around. So a group of spiders is called a cluster. So it's really fun with this year's theme, Tales of Tales, to be able to learn about different animals, about their habitats, and learn some new vocabulary words as well. Does anyone have a fun animal grouping that they know and would like to share in the chat box? Or you can unmute yourself as well. A murder of crows. Thanks, Karen. Tammy knew that one too. I love it. I just think it's fun to learn those new vocabulary words, and children love that same thing. There's a fun game that you can play with this book as well. So I know that lots of times kids like to be up and moving, and playing freeze dance works really well. So if you play freeze dance and you stop the music, everybody freezes, and you roll a large dice, you could get, let's pretend 4 is what you rolled on there. And you could have them get into groups of 4 and pretend that they're a caravan of camels. So you're going to say, we're going to get a caravan of camels, and there's going to be 4 in the caravan. And then after they link their arms and they're grouped, then you play the music and everyone can dance again. You can roll another dice, and you could go up, or you could share another different type of animal grouping. So there's lots of ways that you can be interactive with this book and with this activity. All right. So now that we've had a little bit of fun, we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about this year's STEM Reading Connections program that is brought to you by Nebraska Extension. And I do want to just gauge a little bit from our audience here. I'm going to have you leave your camera on if you have already heard the preview of this program earlier this winter. If you have not heard the preview, I'm going to have you turn your camera off. All right. So it looks like there's just a few of us who are familiar with this summer's resources, and that's great because we will definitely be sharing them in detail with you. All right, here's another question I have for you. I want you to turn your camera off if you plan to use some of the 4-H STEM Reading Connection resources at your library this summer. Turn your camera off if you plan to use some of the resources. Awesome. Well, this is exciting, and we'll be excited to hear towards the end of this training, maybe some of your thoughts on how you plan to incorporate the resources into your setting. So if you want to turn your cameras back on, if that works, we can see your faces as well. So for our time together this afternoon, what we hope to accomplish is we want you to gain an understanding of the components of the 2021 4-H STEM Reading Connection program. And then our hope is for you to be able to develop a plan to incorporate the 4-H STEM Reading Connections resources into your library's programming. So before we get totally into the nuts and bolts of this year's program, it is really important to know that there are 2 different components to the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program. I always like to think of it as an umbrella, and there's 2 different pieces underneath that same umbrella. And so one piece that we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about in the beginning is maybe the piece that you're the most familiar with, and that is the lessons that we create that tie with the collaborative summer reading theme that target youth grades kindergarten through 6th grade. So I like to think of that as kind of our 4-H piece. And then the second piece underneath that same umbrella is the 4-H STEM Imagination Guides. And those are designed specifically for adults who work with younger children. So when we're thinking about the early childhood audience. So we're going to share about both of those different parts of the program, and we'll explore some different ways that you can incorporate them into your setting. So Sarah and I oversee the early childhood piece, of the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program. And then Jennifer Hansen, she coordinates the 4-H component. So I'm going to let Jennifer take it from here, and she's going to share all about this year's exciting lessons.
Thank you, Jackie. So we'll blow through these slides fairly quickly because it seems like we have a little bit of familiarity with our overall program. But just as a reminder, or for those that are new, the 4-H STEM Reading Connection program, it is our program's mission to engage youth in extended 4-H learning opportunities through the collaborative summer library program. To do that, Jackie, if you will advance, thank you. Our program goals include, I gotta advance on my own screen, that would help me too. Okay, to provide 4-H youth development opportunities to all youth, offer educational resources to librarians, youth development professionals, early childhood professionals, and parents, spark an interest in the 4-H program, and provide early childhood professionals and parents with storybook guides to support their literacy development and enhance relationships and to make the connections with the local library. One thing that we want to just make sure that we're very clear on is that we do encourage you to reach out to your local extension office to see if they want to be a partner, but by no means are we saying that every extension office will partner with every library. You guys can kind of imagine that in a county, if there's extension staff, there's multiple libraries and it may not work in the scheduling. So, and not all extension staff are 4-H youth development staff and have an interest in the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program, but do reach out to your local extension office because you never know when they might have an interest in partnering with you, or maybe they'll have a 4-H volunteer or youth that would be interested in partnering with your library. So we're not guaranteeing that extension will be there to help you deliver these lessons, but it's worth the conversation with that local office. So then our next slide includes our overview of our program. So we match 4-H curriculum with the collaborative summer library program theme. And then we create a series of 4 customizable lessons. Customizable is like the word of the day when we do this presentation, because these lessons are meant to work best in whatever situation you're in, and whatever works best for your library. And those of you that have partnered with us in the past fully understand that. You take bits and pieces. I see Amy nodding her head. So you take what works for your situation and you use it. Even though I've helped author these lessons, when I go and deliver them, I deliver them in bits and pieces depending on my setting. So they are customizable. And then there's 8 imagination guides, that early childhood component, and those also are customizable, I do believe. Jackie and Sarah will talk more about that later. And these lessons we make available to libraries, of course, after school programs, 4-H summer camps, schools, youth development professionals, early childhood professionals, and parents. There is an evaluation component that's for the youth and then the presenter/teacher. And the youth one's pretty simple. Like, I like STEM and it's thumbs up or thumbs down or smiley face or frowny face. Pretty simple. We don't want to get too in the weeds on that evaluation component, but we do ask more evaluation questions of the presenter or teacher at the end, just to get you some feedback for future reference. Next slide. Thanks, Jackie. So our content lessons for this year on the 4-H STEM Reading Connection lessons that go with the Tale of Tales are on animal adaptations, heads and tails, your money story, service animal, and farm tales. So these are the customizable lessons. And I think last time we met, we didn't have all the details. We now have details because we've all piloted these, or some of us have piloted some of the lessons, I should say. We haven't piloted all of them personally. So with that, I'm going to start talking about animal adaptations. And this is the one that back in December, Cam presented on. So if we can have our next slide. There we go. So basically, in this lesson, we're going to learn about camouflage patterns and why they're effective. So you're going to ask the youth about camouflage and why animals might do those things. They're also going to look at the colors, the patterns, all of that really cool thing. And then also for this lesson in particular, you want to prompt the students to think about the formal elements of camouflage. So this is where STEM becomes STEAM, and we add that A for art. So you want them to think about shape, pattern, and colors. So in this picture, what is this individual trying to do you suppose? You can type in the chat or unmute, whichever makes you happiest. Blend in with their surroundings, exactly. Wildlife photography, wildlife photos. So you're going to ask students to kind of give you their best guess, and then you're going to talk about how we can effectively camouflage in nature, and then we're going to have the youth design their own camouflage fabric to be worn in a specific environment. And on this next slide, it basically explains how you do that. And all of these instructions are actually in the lesson plan. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which will show you kind of how they did that. So they picked their camouflage, which was the coral reef, which is the big picture in the middle. And then the youth designed their own camouflage to fit in with the colors, textures, and patterns of that coral reef. So it's kind of a fun art activity to do with the youth. In the next lesson, this is the tale from Tales. So this is the tales, I never can say this right, tales from animal tales. There we go, it's tongue twister today. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about how farm animals or domestic animals use their tails for their life. So this lesson also has a social and emotional connection from a fable. So it works well to talk about how everyone's different and that makes them unique and special. When we did this activity, we borrowed youth, AKA any of us in the office that had children. They came and they were our guinea pigs. So that's how we did this. But it's really fun because you read a story about Lucky the cat that falls out of a skyscraper. And we learned that Lucky survived. And so then what the youth get to do is try to make a parachute similar to Lucky to protect their egg that they are dropping. I will tell you, all of these kids were extremely disappointed that their egg didn't break. That is not the goal of the lesson. But you know, when you're working with kids that know you really, really well, they want to just be contrary, right? So they made a parachute similar to how Lucky was able to safely land. And then we also talked about wearable technology for cows, which some of our youth got very into that. There's an activity about horsehair paintbrushes that ties very well to a 4-H project. And then just make sure you leave time at the end for the youth to kind of talk about what they have seen animals use their tails for. In the next slide, some tips and tricks. So we piloted, or someone on our team piloted each of these lessons. And so we have some tips that may make it easier as you go to replicate this in your libraries. During the opening questions, we talk about what a dog's tail position might mean. And for our youth, it was easier if I talked about the puppy that lives at my house, right? I said, okay, so when Bella's tail does this, what does it mean? So having pictures of animals with tails that they can view may be beneficial. That's not something that we included because we can have a wide variety of pictures, but that is something to think about. If they're familiar, you know, if there's a cat that hangs out by your library, I know some libraries have service animals that come to them. Those are all great things to talk about, that tail position and what that could mean. In the story that's referenced in the parachute like a cat, that's Lucky from the opening questions, and that's the kitty cat that fell out of the skyscraper. Our younger youth were more interested in doing the parachute activity. They wanted to do that parachute activity again and again. The older youth, because we had kindergarten through 6th grade represented, they wanted to spend more time talking about wearable technology, which led into a discussion of what they wanted for their birthdays and needing GoPros and GPS units, pedometer type things for dogs. Like we kind of went somewhere with that. But that was a lot of fun. If you don't have access to some of the supplies needed for the wearable technology for cows, there is a 4-H curriculum that your local offices may have that was called Wearable Tech or Incredible Wearables, and they can make their own version of a wearable technology tracker. So that might be another way to supplement this lesson. I do believe I'm going to pass it off to Anne.
Well, hello. The next slide that we have is Tail and Tails at your service. So this lesson really talks about some of the service animals that you might deal with, particularly cats and dogs and those types of things, mostly dogs. But we have a physical activity experience with this lesson that we really like. It is you and your partner decide what your service animal will be. So one of you is going to have some physical problem. Maybe you're blind, maybe you're deaf, maybe you're missing an arm. So the children have to decide what the problem is. And then they have to decide what kind of animal will help them. So maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a goat, you know, whatever the animal, whatever they think was really going to help that other child take care of the problem. And then they have to figure out how to communicate. So is it a tail wagging? Is it blinking? Is it I snap my fingers in a certain way? How are we going to communicate to do certain activities? In the room, there will be several activities that they have to complete. One activity might be sign a piece of paper. One activity might be stack these blocks. So some physical activities will be easier with different tasks than others, but it's really those two have to rely on each other to get the activities done. And we really think that's going to help the child think about what happens when someone's got a physical disability. How do those animals communicate? What do we need to do with those? So it challenges the child to empathize with other people and understand that not every challenge that's put to somebody is easy to accomplish. So the next slide tells us a little bit about the tips and tricks. And I'm going to have Jennifer talk about that because she piloted this program.
Hi there. So Wheeler Central School, I was allowed to pilot the program with all of the K through 5 students this year. Wheeler County doesn't actually have a public library, so I'm really lucky that the school library allows me to come in and do these activities with them. And so because of the time and space, I didn't actually get to pilot the physical activity. But I will say in terms of tips and tricks, that Beth and Hanny, Safe and Sound, was the story that it was incorporated into this lesson for the elementary age group. And the youth really engaged with this story. So if at all possible through interlibrary loan, if this isn't a book that you have in your library or through purchasing, I would really recommend tracking down this book. I know sometimes in smaller libraries, it's easier to substitute than it is to track down that story. But this one, they really connected. It got them very curious. This story actually explores how a woman has connected with her service animal, how their relationship started, and some of the situations that they encountered together once they became a pairing. So definitely recommend that. One of our activities is called Manners Matter, and we wanted to focus on making sure the youth understood what the manners are in regards to interacting with a service animal, such as we don't immediately approach a service animal. That we don't walk up and pet them, we don't feed them. We want to make sure that we're not distracting them from the really important work that they're doing. And so in that activity, we have kind of a guided questioning to take them through. And when I went and piloted this, I realized I didn't write that in the most engaging manner. And so I would definitely recommend, in terms of tips and tricks, think of a fun way to make that engaging and more active. And as I piloted it, we added popcorn answering. I don't know if this is actually a real thing, but this is something that I do when I teach. And rather than raising their hands to ask a question, they're supposed to act like popcorn and pop out of their chair so that the first one who pops, that's who we call on to answer that question. It just gets them a little more active, and you can really gauge how engaged the room is by how many popcorn pieces are popping around the room. And so The other activity that we have in this lesson is called a perfect helper. And in this activity, using what they've learned through that physical activity, using what they've learned through the story, we're asking them to design a helper for somebody that they know who has a need that they could meet. And so they have to determine who that person is and determine what that need might be. And using junk drawer materials or maybe paper and markers, if that's possible, designing what that animal could look like. Is it important for that animal to be big and strong, or is it okay for that animal to be small? Would it be better if that animal had feathers, or maybe it'd be better if that animal had fur? So for instance, if the animal was providing balance for someone, maybe a Great Dane would be a better option than a Chihuahua. But it's fun to let them run with it and be creative and think of someone that they know. And so one of the examples that came out of this from Wheeler Central was we had a student who had an uncle who came back from war and really enjoyed hunting, but some of the damage that he incurred during participating as a soldier made it difficult for him to hunt because he had visual issues. And so this 4-H'er, or actually he is a 4-H'er too, thought of the idea of sending a parrot with his uncle to go hunting. So the parrot could scope out what was going on, see that for him, come back, and the parrot could communicate then what he saw to the hunter. And so I thought that was kind of a creative solution. Maybe the speaking part of it wouldn't be so helpful with the hunting. I don't know. But it's their chance to really use their creative muscles, use their science knowledge in terms of solving problems and being creative. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, that's our tips and tricks for At Your Service. And I'll also be talking to you today about the lesson Heads and Tails. And while I am not one of the authors of Heads and Tails, I did get to pilot this one with Wheeler Central very recently as well. And so if you wouldn't mind advancing, Jackie. So Heads and Tails is different than the remainder of the lessons because rather than focusing on animals and animal science, this lesson focuses on money and personal finance. And so I think it's kind of nice to have that different spin because different youth have different interests. And so you can maybe capture someone who maybe isn't as much into animals, which I think most youth usually are. But this is just something a little bit different for them. So this covers an overview of monetary value, and in a nice way that it's kind of a review because most of these youth have an understanding of monetary value, but it's a fun way to review it. So one of the activities focuses on how everyone's needs and wants are different so that we can respect and empathize with their perspective. And so there is an activity that they have a whole list of different wants and needs, and you get to ask them whether or not they think that item is a need or a want. And some of them can get pretty contentious in the room. One of them on the list that I know we had a lot of discussion about was bedroom furniture. Is bedroom furniture a need or is it a want? We had a lot of youth that thought that was a need, but when we really got talking about it, can we live without our beds? Well, sure we can. They definitely add to our quality of life. But if we had to sleep on the floor, we could do that if that was necessary. Another one that was really big in discussion was hugs. And after the year that we've had with the pandemic, a lot of us have a lot stronger opinions probably than we had before about how important physical touch is in terms of our human connection. So are hugs a need or a want? And actually most of the youth determined that was a need. They needed that human connection. So interesting discussions there if you can facilitate those. And then there's also an introduction to budgeting and managing money with their own piggy banks, so they can make their own piggy banks. If you wouldn't mind advancing, Jackie. So in terms of tips and tricks, there's a money identification activity where they get to see how much money Herbie Husker has in the bank. And this one surprised me when I was piloting it because I read it, and not being the author, that's kind of the fun thing about piloting is you don't know exactly entirely what they intended, you get to guess what they intended. And so when I read this, I thought, I don't know about this activity. And I was surprised at how invested the youth got in this activity. They got so excited. It's a dice rolling activity where each number on the dice is associated with a coin. And they would get so invested in making sure that you were rolling a 2 so they could get a nickel, or you were rolling a 4 so they could get a quarter. They got very, very into that. I would say if you're going to pilot this or teach this with a group that's maybe K through 6, you might want to pair some of the older youth with the younger youth for this activity if they don't have as the math skills or maybe have those monetary values down quite yet. I was moving classroom to classroom so we could kind of stay together as a group in terms of how much they understood, but I know when I teach this in the summer, we've got a mix of ages together. So I would definitely recommend probably working in partners for this in that environment if that's you too. And then everyone's needs and wants will be different. So some will say that rent and food are needs, and some will say that cell phones are a need. That was another big discussion for us. Is the cell phone really necessary? Just make sure to keep the conversation open and understanding. And I think the younger youth, for me at least, did a pretty good job of keeping that conversation on track. The older ones with their creativity, and towards the end of the day, I suppose too, it was not hard for them to get off track and start to go down the ridiculous a little bit. So that's where being the facilitator of the conversation and guiding that conversation and keeping it going is important. So there's my tip for this lesson.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Gloop. I am the Extension Associate in Boone and Nance County. So I come to you from central Nebraska. And my role on this team was to help come up with workshop ideas for like a traditional 4-H workshop. And when we were kind of putting this into play the last couple, I think this is our second year that we've done this. We decided that this could work in a variety of ways. If your library is big enough to host workshops, we encourage you to reach out to your extension office and encourage them to potentially host a workshop at your library. Or maybe if you're not able to meet in person still, you can reach out to the extension office and talk about ways or different ideas that you can maybe do some grab and go concepts if you haven't done that already. So for 2021, we decided to do 2 different options for the traditional 4-Hers. And if you're not 100% familiar with 4-H, the traditional age is around 3rd grade, that 8-year-old, all the way up to 18. And we have 2, and once again, we hear that word, customizable options. 2 options this year. We went down the path of conservation and wildlife, and then we also went down the path of human development. And so if you would advance, Jackie, thank you. So the first area is conservation and wildlife, and we kind of went with the animal track concept. And when I was putting this lesson together, I put it together as a grab and go component to where you or the extension office could put together a kit, an educational kit, where you would have a baggie of plaster of Paris. You'd have a little strip of cardboard stock, some sort of thicker paper, a paper clip, etc. And then the family would be responsible with going out into nature and finding that track in the ground and adding water to their plaster of Paris and then making the track cast themselves. We do have an educational piece that goes with that. So if this is something you're interested in, definitely reach out to your extension office if you'd like to see what that educational material, I guess, for lack of other words, would look like. So that way you don't have to recreate the wheel. You could simply enclose that with that. If you have access to tracks or cast, it can easily be done in person. And I have done this workshop actually in the Genoa Library in an after-school setting, and the kids love, love, love making animal tracks. They, a lot of times the wildlife animals are things that people or the kids don't get to experience necessarily. They see the domestic aspect. And so the tracks that we utilized had a lot of different varieties in the tracks, and the kids loved it. We had a great time. And with both of these workshops, there is a fair project that can go along with that. So in this case, in the conservation and wildlife, the environmental education area, they can actually enter this in the animal track class. And if you would like to do this in person, these are the 2 different track ideas that I am, I guess, bringing forward. The vinyl ones are the ones we've used in the past, where the plaster of Paris is poured into that mold. You can purchase them. They're around $10 a track, or you can buy the set of 6. I think there's a set of 16, I think it says. The other option is if you have a connection to the Game and Parks, which I do, and on a couple slides down the road, I do have a contact information for you. They are, depending on availability and location of where you are, the Game and Parks does check out some of their equipment. So this is an opportunity that you could potentially get from the Game and Parks if you don't want to purchase them or don't have the budget for that. And then the other option is the resin track, which when we've done it in a camp setting in the past, we just have a little pile of sand, and then we take the resin cast and push it into the sand, and then we pour the plaster into it like they were out in the wild. And they're about the same price as the vinyl tracks as well. I think that's, yeah. So then the second option is a human development, and a lot of, or child development, depending on what you're familiar with. And this is making a building blocks out of, I forgot where I put it, out of the Duplo blocks. So you could buy a set of Duplo blocks, and then we have a sheet that comes with your materials that has different animal pictures, their tracks, and their name. And you could potentially do a 1 or 2 hour in-person workshop. And I know in extension, a lot of times we use something like this in a babysitting class. So maybe that's something your community has a need for. And if you have the space to host a babysitting workshop, that would be a great thing for your community to host, to bring people in to host the babysitting workshop. And then you can make this as a toy that a youth member could take along on their next babysitting adventure. And with this in-person workshop, we would talk about the different tracks and animals, and we'd also talk about ages and stages. So with a toddler, how would you use this toy? With an elementary age kid, how would you use this? Those kinds of things, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, or just give the kids some comfort level when they are out babysitting. And then the other kind of another spin on it, if you are wanting to do that grab and go concept, you could totally make this into a grab and go workshop as well. You provide the kids with some Duplo blocks, which you can buy on Amazon, or I'm sure other places as well. And you provide the page with the names and the pictures of the animals. And then they just have some Mod Podge and make them themselves at home. So it's kind of up to you and your comfort level. But this would be in the human development area. And in that area, the extension staff know there's 5 or so different classes. So depending on how the child or the youth liked envision using this, that it could go in a different class. I think there's one more slide. So for those of you who are interested in reaching out, the Nebraska Game and Parks contact is Monica, and her information is there. And one resource that I'd like to mention, it doesn't matter if you're an extension or not, they have this wildlife tracks booklet set, a booklet and card set. And so the cards are pretty decent size, and they're really good pictures, and they have tracks on them as well. So this would be a fun resource. It's free. You just simply call or email Monica and you tell her how many you want, and she ships it out. Or if you have a person that is around the Game and Parks in Lincoln, you can simply pick them up as well. But that's a cool resource that you could have on hand to include in a wildlife type workshop or activity that you might want to plan. I think that's about all I have.
Awesome. And I think we're going to just kind of pause right here for a moment before we go on to the early childhood portion of the 4-H STEM Reading Connection program. Are there any questions or things that you need clarified? Now's the time to ask, because the authors are on this Zoom with you.
For instance, in this case where you say that the tips for the grab and go bag the extension office provides, that would actually be the library would provide that, correct?
Yeah, it could go either way. If you want to partner with your extension office, you guys could decide who would provide. But yes, when in my case, since I wrote the slide, I would say my extension office, or I would provide blah, blah, blah. Yes. So yes, it would be the library, or like I said, I think most people would be willing to partner to a certain extent. So definitely reach out to them.
Great question, Amy. other things that you have on your mind? All right, not hearing any at this time. Feel free, if something pops into your mind, go ahead and type it in the chat box and we'll definitely come back and we'll address that. But what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to the early childhood component called the STEM Imagination Guides.
Okay, so my name is Sarah Roberts, and I am an extension educator based out of the Haskell Ag Lab in Concord, Nebraska. So I'm going to kick us off with our STEM Imagination Guides, which, like Jackie said, this is the early childhood component of this program. And how we kind of got started with this is last year we decided that there was kind of a gap in between the school age and the early childhood providers that might visit some of your libraries throughout the summer. And so we wanted to make sure to be able to reach that audience with some early childhood resources that providers could use, and also start building relationships with their local libraries, as well as the parents and families that they work with the children in their care. So whenever you go to the website, and we can post it in the chat here in just a minute, and we're going to actually do a little website tour of this here shortly, but I just wanted to show you what it will look like once you actually go out to the website. So once you go there, this is kind of the main page that you'll see. And so it gives you a little overview of what the program is about, as well as some of the features of each guide. And so, like I said, since we started this last year, this is our second year to do this. So we've made some adjustments to some of our formatting, as well as, of course, the theme that we're on this year. And so last year, the theme was all about fairy tales. So it would look similar to this. We had 8 different fairy tale books. And if you were able to do them last year, it was similar to this. It just had our fairy tale books featured on here. So of course, this year, since we're all about talking about animals, the direction that we wanted to take it for the early childhood side of things was to go with animal habitats. So basically, we did the same thing as we did last year. So we chose 8 different books that we wanted to feature for each guide, and then we built our guides off of each one of those. And so again, last year we still had the 8 guides, and those are still on the website. You can still access those. These are just the most recent ones. And that's basically what will happen each year that we do these. The previous year's ones you'll still be able to find on the website, but whatever the current year theme is will be the ones that are featured on the main page. So you can see the 8 books that we have here. And the first one there, Polar Bear, What Do You Hear? So that goes along with our tundra habitat. Then we move on to the Big Red Barn, and that one, of course, is farm. And so we, of course, wanted to include that since we are all about agriculture here in the Midwest. And then one of the things that we wanted to do, especially since a lot of children have pets at home, we wanted to recognize that the home is kind of a habitat, especially for different animals like cats, dogs. You know, if children do live on a farm and they may have other animals that they consider a pet. I mean, I have goats at my house that basically are pets. So even though I technically live on the farm, those are my babies, just like my cats and dogs. So Not Norman is all about a goldfish. And so we wanted to make sure to include some animals that other children that may not live on a farm could relate to. So then we have the Great Kapok Tree, and that one is, of course, about the rainforest. Then moving down to the second row there, we have Cactus Hotel, and that one is the desert habitat. Then, of course, Hello Ocean, so the ocean habitat. Owl Babies is what we chose to do for the forest habitat. And then I Don't Want to Be a Frog is for our pond habitat. So again, each one of these kind of goes along with each one of the habitats. And when you get to the actual guides, you'll see that they have a very similar format. And so this is what the guides are going to look like. And if you did any of these last year, they were a little bit different as far as what format we went with. So last year it was kind of like a trifold brochure. And after we got some of our evaluations back and we kind of looked at how people were accessing these and how they were using them, I don't know if it was maybe the majority, but many people were printing them out and using them as lesson plans or giving them out to their teachers or just, using them that way. So we kind of wanted to make it a little bit more printer friendly. So this year we went with like a 2-page newsletter format. And so, this one specifically is all about the home environment or the home habitat, but all of them are going to look similar to this as far as the format goes. So you can see the page 1 and page 2 there. So page 1 is the one there on the left. And so the background, you can kind of see the house behind there in the background. And so on all of the guides, there's a different background corresponding with whatever habitat it may be. So that's going to be similar through all of those. So up at the top, you have the featured story. So the ones that I already just kind of went over with you. And then the conversation starters. And so the conversation starters actually go along with that specific story for the most part. But if you don't have that book in your library, or if your early childhood providers don't have that book, or if it's just not available, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You can still do these activities based on whatever habitat it may be. So we wanted to feature a book just because we wanted to connect it with literacy and reading, but that doesn't mean that that's the only book that you can use for these activities. So then below that is our STEM connection. So each habitat has a STEM connection, and it's usually some type of like experiment that you can do. And we wanted to make it pretty interactive. And most of them are things that you might have at home, or you might already have, a lot of our providers have some of these materials. So we kind of wanted to make it pretty easy for everyone to be able to access. And so then on the second page there, on all of them, we have a sensory activity, a music and movement activity, and then some type of creative arts activity. So again, the formatting for all of these is the same, just the activities and pictures and all of those things are the ones that are the features that are going to be changing. And then we just also wanted to provide a background for why we did this program and how it connects with the summer reading program that you all do with 4-H age and school agers. So then, of course, our contact information is there. And then at the bottom of that down there is the related readings also. So that's kind of what the formatting looks like for all of them. And the other piece that we wanted to include with this is we're calling it like our parent piece. And so, like I said before, one of the goals that we had for this particular program was to help our providers and you all as librarians to connect with families. So not just, the early childhood providers, but also bringing in that family piece and making sure that we can kind of build those connections. So we came up with these infographics that can be handed out to parents, or, you can use them as well. So again, it's not just for parents, but that was kind of the intent of them, is that, if a child care was doing a desert theme or something, and they were using the activities that went along with that habitat, then they could print off this infographic and send it home and say, all right, here's some of the things that we've been doing. And here's an activity that you can do at home with your kids, or, with your friends, or however you wanted to do it. So each one of the infographics has a nature connection. So there's another activity there that can be done outside. Most of it has to do with nature or going outdoors or something like that. And then there are some quick facts about each one of those habitats, and then also some resources. So if they wanted more information, we provided some educational websites that they can go to get more facts, or I think one of them or several of them have like other lessons that you can download and things like that. So that's what we wanted to provide with these. I will say that some of the feedback that we've already gotten from this is that, so when I did the infographics, they were designed kind of in a tall, skinny way. And so they weren't easily printable. So I am going back and kind of reformatting them into a page view. So that way you can print them off and it won't be so small that way. So that one, they'll look the same as far as the background and colors and all that. They'll just be a little bit different, differently formatted. All right. Okay. Am I talking about this too? Okay. So the cool thing about this, and kind of like we've already said with the other guides, is that all of these activities and guides that we've provided are fully customizable to what your needs are. You can select any of them that you want to include. You can pick one of them, or you can pick all of them, or you can pick one activity from one and two activities from another. It doesn't really matter. So again, we just wanted to be able to provide some resources that gave you that flexibility if you wanted it. But if you want something that is, you know, right there for you that you can just take and run with it, that's there as well. So you kind of want to think about if you're going to implement this, like what your time frame might be. And then if you wanted to do some sort of stations or something like that, you know, how is that going to look with the children that you work with, or if you have adults that are going to be able to help you. We would recommend that you have at least one adult with you just helping, just because, you know, especially if you have a lot of children that you have working with, and that way you can kind of facilitate this a little bit easier. And then, you know, have fun with it. So we really, I think, you know, I will speak for Jackie and I, we've had a lot of fun with this. It's been really exciting to develop all these things. We're excited for next year's theme as well, but it's something that, I don't know, I feel like we're pretty proud of it, and we just love it. I don't know, it's really fun. And if you know me at all, you know I love science and animals, so I think they're all really fun, and I'm super excited to be able to share all of these with you. So we also have these pictures complimentary of Peggy. She has provided these for us from her library. So, you know, feel free to send us those pictures. We have several trainings coming up, and I think that might be the next slide actually. But so we are kind of doing this and presenting this to other places. And so if you have pictures or videos or anything like that that you want us to share, we are happy to do that. We're happy to include that in all of our, you know, kind of our promotion materials and that sort of thing. And so these are the upcoming trainings that we have. So kind of, it'll be more of an in-depth look at each one of these guides. And so we have a training on the 21st that you're welcome to join. And basically what it's going to do is go through each one separately and kind of look at all the activities individually. So if that's something you're interested in, you're welcome to join us for that. It's free. It's going to be, I think we're going to do an hour and a half for that one, just because we're super excited about it. We have lots and lots of things to tell you, more than we could in our short time with you today. But if you can't join us for that, it's totally fine. Like, you can still use these guides. You don't have to attend a training to be able to use them. But if you are wanting more information and kind of wanting to dive a little bit deeper into those, please join us on the 21st at 1 o'clock, and you can register at that link there, and we'll put that in the chat as well. So that way you can do that. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Jackie, and we look forward to working with you on these guides this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to go back just a slide. Oops, back, not forward. And do give a shout out to Peggy Lighting. So thank you. She was one of 14 different sites that piloted our lessons. And so each one of them piloted different lessons, maybe the desert lesson, in this case, the Arctic lesson. And this was a great video that she shared with us. It's really short, but she is doing the STEM activity for the Polar Bear, What Do You Hear book. And what this one is doing is they're exploring how polar bears stay warm. And so they're learning about blubber and how blubber helps to keep them warm. So I'll let you watch this short video.
All right, there you go. Now stick your hand over here. Can you tell the difference?
Get one and cold.
That one's cold and this one. That blubber really works, doesn't it? Okay.
All right, so as you can see, it was on a winter day. She went out and she gathered some snow from outside. And then inside that baggie, there is Crisco that actually goes around the outside. So there's 2 bags with the Crisco sandwiched in between. And that's the blubber. And as you watch that little lady there, as she put both hands in at the same time, one hand came out a lot quicker. And so that's just a hands-on way for them to experience how animals in the Arctic stay warm. So thank you again to Peggy for piloting, and then all the others who piloted our lessons and gave us great feedback as well. So now what we're going to do, I know Kirsten wrote in the chat box, like, where do I get these resources? So let's go out to the website and find out. So hopefully my right screen pops up here. And here we go. And so what I'm going to do right now is I will copy it and I'm going to place it in the chat box so everyone has it. So this is the bottom of our website. Here's the top of our website. Our goal when we were designing this website was to make it very user-friendly. So we don't want it complicated. We don't want a lot of clicks. We don't want it opening up a bunch of other pages. So we just wanted to be able to have one place where you could go to get these resources. So you can see at the top, it just gives you an overview of the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program. And as we shared that we're having a library training again on the 21st, if you would like to look at each guide and maybe more in depth and hear the tips and tricks for these particular guides, you can do that on the 21st, but also feel free to share with your childcare providers and teachers in your area. We are having another workshop on Earth Day, the 22nd. And so right on our website, the flyer's there. If you would like to download it and hang it up in your library, you can sure do that. But you can also share this website on your social media pages because they can go right here and they can register. So this is a website that's meant to be shared very broadly. We've mentioned the word customizable. In general, the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program is not a one size fits all. Just like we know every library is different, every extension office is different, we know that these programs are going to be implemented in many different ways. And so feel free to make the needed changes that fit kind of the youth that you are working with. So as you scroll down, you can see the 8 storybooks that Sarah mentioned a little bit earlier. So they're all here. And then what it does share is it shares what the STEM challenge is. So if I look at the Cactus Hotel, how does a cactus conserve water? Or if I look at this, I don't want to be a frog, it's how can I use static electricity to make a frog jump? And the really fun thing about that one is the children blow up a balloon, they rub it on their hair, and then we have little frogs that are cut out of copy paper, and they take their balloon and they'll see those frogs jump up to their balloon. And so it's a really hands-on, and they're able to see how static electricity helps a frog to jump. So if you're interested in any of these, you simply click on download this STEM Imagination Guide. We are going to collect just a little bit of information from you because thanks to all of you every year, you provide us with awesome feedback so that we can keep on enhancing and tailoring this program so it meets your library's needs. So you would just simply select the guides that you're interested in. You would tell us about what setting you're going to use them in, and then share with us your email address, because we will be following up about 6 months later to find out your thoughts as we go to develop our ocean storybook guides further down the road. So you're able to download all of these when you get to the file. So save them onto your computer so you have them handy. After you've done that, you're just ready to get started. So you can use them as a lesson plan for yourself. You can create kind of book packets that have the book, maybe some of the supplies that you would need for some of the activities in the lesson plan, and you can check those out to your patrons in your library. You could do grab and go kits with these. Really, the sky's the limit. As I scroll down, you can see a quote that we really appreciate. It says, "These activities engage the children. The connection between the activities and the book is easy to grasp. These guides encourage play, and children are eager to participate." And so we know that young children learn best through play. And that is when we're thinking about our STEM activities, we're developing curiosity. We're helping to just spark some questions and thoughts in their mind. They're having some teamwork as they work on different teams. So that play and that STEM goes hand in hand. As Sarah mentioned last year's storybook guides, all you need to do is click on this red button, and then it will open a page that looks similar to the page we were just on, but it has all the storybook guides from last year. So ultimately, year after year, we're just creating a bigger and bigger bank, which is really exciting. And we call this the 4-H STEM Reading Connections program, and a lot of times our programming happens during the summer. However, it's important to remember that, certain storybooks aren't just useful during the summer. This program can be used all year long, just like Jen had mentioned that she had done the piloting in school settings. So you can use them in library settings, after school settings, camp settings, whatever type of setting makes sense to you. So as I go back here's the second piece from underneath our umbrella. So we had talked about the 4-H component with all the different lessons that are available for K through 6th grade. When you scroll down, it's right here again. So what you do is you simply click on the button. There's a couple questions that you'll answer just so that we can know the reach of our program. And once you enter your email address for us, you're going to be taken to a folder, and you can download all of those resources as one giant PDF. And then you can click the tabs to get to the certain lessons that you're interested in. So after you fill it out once, save it to your computer and it's yours. Sonia talked about a 4-H human development and wildlife workshops. There's also a Clover Kid workshop. So if you kind of like the format that she was talking about, there's one for Clover Kids. And when we talk about Clover Kids, we're talking about youth ages 5 to 8. And in this particular one is actually where you're using the storybook guides or the imagination guides and setting up stations. So they would go around to the different STEM stations. So there's another option for you if you do even a family night or a family day in your library. And you get down to the bottom of the page and you see our contact information. So it's all right there for you. Once again, we encourage you to use the resources, but feel free to share this website with your patrons and on your social media pages as well, because really any caring adult who likes to read with children, it could be even a young adult who's babysitting during the summer. This gives a lot of great resources to them. We gave a presentation earlier this morning about the STEM imagination guides, and somebody said, this sounds great for grandparents. And so I just feel like all of the resources that we have are applicable for so many different settings. So with that in mind, I can tell that we are just about over our time just a little bit, but I just would love to gauge from all of you. And if you could turn on your cameras, that would be great. We're going to do what's called scale fingers. And so on a scale from 1 to 5, I would like to just find out how interested are you in utilizing some of the 4-H STEM Reading Connections resources. If you're not very interested, you could put up a 1 or a 0, or if you're very interested, show us a 5. All right, and I'm going to sneak through all so I can see all of you. Good. Some people said we don't have our cameras on when you're typing in the chat box. That's great. Awesome. Well, we're really excited to see that. And the last thing that we would love to do is right now, best guess today, how do you plan to implement this program? Are there certain pieces that you plan to implement, or what are your thoughts? You can unmute yourself, or if you'd like to type that in the chat box, that would be perfect as well. Tammy wants to use it as a grandma. That's great news.
Yeah.
All right. Into the grab and go bags. I'm curious to kind of see, I think the library summer programming is going to look completely different across the state. So we know that some may be in person if they're maybe in a smaller setting, but we know some of the larger libraries may be using grab and goes. Other places might be doing a combination of both, because the grab and goes were successful last year. And we've even discovered that within Extension as well. All right, so I'm seeing some specifics with their outdoor program, with animal adaptations. That's a lesson that they're interested in. That is really fun to incorporate that A for STEAM into the animal adaptations lesson. They're able to get really creative with that as they make their swatch. All right. I know we went a little long, but what questions do you still have for us? All right. Hearing none at this time, that's all right, but feel free to reach out to any of us. You can jot our names and email addresses down here. Otherwise, remember our contact information was on our website. So if you forget it and you can't find it and you think, where do I need to go? Just go to the website where you got the resources and you can find our contact information on there as well. We are always happy to help. So reach out to us. Like Jennifer mentioned, we can't make a promise that every extension office in Nebraska has a youth serving extension educator, but it is always great just to connect and see what types of partnerships you can develop. I know that over the past years, there's been some wonderful relationships just across the state that we've heard of. And we hope that those relationships continue to grow. So thank you again, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy, for the invitation.
Absolutely.